Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking a story that honestly feels like it belongs in a movie script rather than a history book.
It really does.
We're talking about someone who started out studying microscopic anatomy, literally looking at cells under a microscope, and ended up somehow toppling a dictatorship.
It's a remarkable journey. And, usually when we think of revolutionaries, we think of soldiers or politicians, maybe charismatic orators with megaphones.
Right, leading crowds in a city square.
Exactly. We don't typically think of someone on their knees in the dirt digging a hole with their bare hands to plant a seedling.
Exactly. But that's the hook today. We are looking at the life of Wangarĩ Maathai, and the core question we're trying to answer in this deep dive is this. How does planting a tree lead to overthrowing a government?
Right.
Because on the surface, those two things seem completely unrelated. Like, I'm going to garden until the president quits. It sounds, absurd.
They do seem distinct. But as we go through the source material, and for this we're looking at her biography, her fantastic memoir, Unbowed, and the historical records of her activism in Kenya, you start to see that for Maathai, they were the exact same thing.
Okay, so let's set the stakes right at the top. This isn't just some local story that stayed local.
Oh, not at all. In 2004, Wangarĩ Maathai became the first African woman and the first environmentalist ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Which is a massive, massive milestone. Just think about the usual categories for the Nobel Peace Prize. It's ending a war, signing a treaty.
Humanitarian aid in a war zone, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And she won it for sustainable development, democracy, and peace. And getting there involved tear gas, it involved divorce courts, hunger strikes, and facing down armed police. It's an incredible story.
It's a real redefining of what peace actually means. It suggests that, you can't really have peace if people are fighting over scarce resources like water and wood.
That's a great point.
It forces us to look at the environment not just as this, pretty backdrop for human activity, but as a central player in political stability.
Okay, so before we get to the global stage, or the tear gas...
We have to go back to the soil, literally.
Let's do it. Section 1, the seed. So Wangarĩ Maathai was born in 1940 in the Nyeri district in the Central Highlands of Kenya, and the context here is so important. This was British colonial Kenya. She was Kikuyu, which is the most populous ethnic group there.
And her early life is this fascinating mix of a traditional rural upbringing and this incredibly rigorous, almost unlikely academic path. She started at a village school in Ihive. You have to picture the setting. It's lush, green hills, very agricultural.
But also living under the strict rules of colonial life.
Exactly. But she was clearly brilliant from the jump. The sources all say she was rated first in her class.
Not just a good student, but number one.
Number one. And that brilliance was basically her ticket out. She moved from the village school to a Catholic mission school, St. Cecilia's, where she became fluent in English and converted to Catholicism.
And this was happening while the Mao uprising was going on around her, right?
It was this violent struggle for independence. But she was somewhat sheltered from it, within the walls of the school. By the time she finished there in 1956, she was again top of her class and got into Laredo High School.
And Laredo wasn't just any high school.
No, not at all. It was the only Catholic high school for native Kenyan girls in the entire country at the time.
Wow.
So just by being there, she was already in, the top fraction of 1% of educated women in Kenya. She was breaking barriers just by showing up to class.
So she's number one in her class. She's on this incredible trajectory, and then history just intervenes. This moment called the Kennedy Airlift. This is one of those historical footnotes that had a massive impact, but I feel like a lot of people haven't heard of it.
Airlift Africa? Yeah. This is such a cool piece of history. So it's 1960. Colonialism is on its last legs. The British Empire is winding down in East Africa.
Right.
And you had these visionary Kenyan politicians like Tom Mboya who realized that, okay, once the British leave, Kenya is going to need its own doctors, its own scientists, its own economists. They needed to build a professional class from scratch.
So Mboya teams up with Senator John F. Kennedy. This is before he was president.
Yes, while he was still campaigning. They organized funding to bring the most promising Kenyan students to the West for a university education so they could return and lead a free Kenya. It was a massive logistical operation.
And just for context for everyone listening, this is the same program that brought Barack Obama's father to America.
Exactly. It really shaped the future of the region in ways no one could have predicted.
So out of thousands of potential candidates, Wangarĩ Maathai is one of about 300 selected in September 1960.
Can you just imagine that scene? She leaves the highlands of Kenya, gets on a plane, probably for the very first time, and flies across the Atlantic Ocean. She lands in Atchison, Kansas.
Not exactly New York City or London. That's a bit of a shock, I'd imagine.
A massive culture shock from the Kikuyu Highlands to the American Midwest. She enrolled at Mount St. Scholastica College. It was a Catholic women's college. She studied biology there, minored in chemistry and German. She was just, devouring knowledge.
And then she goes to the University of Pittsburgh for her master's. And this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. You'd think she would learn about environmentalism in the pristine forests of Kenya.
Right, where the elephants and leopards are.
Yeah, but she actually had her big aha moment in Pittsburgh.
In the Steel City.
Yeah, of all places.
And we have to remember, Pittsburgh in the 1960s wasn't the clean tech hub it is today. It was industrial, it was smoky, they were dealing with severe air pollution. But what Maathai saw wasn't just the pollution, she saw the reaction to it.
Okay.
She saw local activists pushing to clean up the city. She saw citizens organizing and demanding better air quality from their government and from the corporations.
That's a huge distinction. She saw that the environment was a civic issue. It wasn't just a fact of life.
Precisely. She realized that the environment wasn't just nature out there that you visit on a safari. It was something you had to fight for politically. If the air is dirty, it's because someone is allowed to make it dirty. And if you want it clean, you have to organize. That lesson, learned in industrial Pennsylvania, would become the blueprint for her entire life.
She gets her master's, she absorbs the spirit of activism, and then she returns to Kenya in 1966.
And she makes a statement right away. She drops her Christian forename, Mary Josephine, and goes by her birth name, Wangarĩ Maathai. She is ready to serve her country. But this is where she hits the first wall.
The glass ceiling?
The glass ceiling was more like a concrete wall in 1966 Kenya. She had a job waiting for her at the University College of Nairobi as a research assistant. It was promised to her. But when she arrived, ready to start work, she was told the job had been withdrawn.
What? Why?
It was gone. It had been given to someone else. She believed it was a combination of gender and tribal bias.
So even with her incredible education...
It didn't matter. Kenya was independent now, but it was rife with internal politics. Being a woman and being Kikuyu and being so highly educated, it intimidated people. It was a really harsh welcome home.
But she didn't just pack up and go home.
No, she fought. She found another way in. She eventually landed a job in the Department of Veterinary Anatomy, thanks to a Professor Hoffman from Germany who judged her on her merits, not her tribe or her gender. She just kept climbing.
And in 1971, she becomes the first woman in all of East and Central Africa to earn a PhD.
Which is just a staggering achievement. We really can't gloss over that. In a region where many women weren't even finishing primary school, she earned a doctorate.
And just to give the specific detail, because I know our listeners love the niche facts, what was her dissertation on?
Her dissertation was on the development and differentiation of gonads in bovines.
Cattle anatomy. Okay, I did not see that coming. That is very specific.
It is very specific science. But it matters because it establishes her credentials.
Yeah.
She wasn't just an activist with good feelings about trees. She was a scientist. She understood biological systems. She understood growth cycles, how organisms develop, how they react to stress.
Okay, that makes sense.
So later, when she looked at the problems facing Kenya in the mid-1970s, she wasn't looking at them like a politician. She was looking at them like a biologist diagnosing a sick patient.
And that diagnosis brings us to Section 2, the Greenbelt movement. She's now working with the National Council of Women of Kenya, the NCWK, and she starts noticing a pattern in what the women from rural areas are telling her.
Right? She's traveling around the country, just listening to rural women.
Yeah.
And the complaints are all so consistent. We don't have firewood to cook. The streams we get drinking water from are dirty. The food isn't nutritious enough for our children.
Now, a politician might hear that and say, okay, we need to build a dam or we need to import food aid. Exactly. Separate problems, separate solutions. But Maathai, with her biologist's mind, realized these weren't separate issues at all. They were all symptoms of one underlying disease: environmental degradation.
Okay, explain that connection for us. How does no firewood lead directly to malnutrition?
Well, think about it. If you cut down all the forests for timber or to clear land for cash crops, you have no wood. If you have no wood, you can't cook the foods that require long boiling times, like nutritious beans or grains.
So you switch to processed foods or things that cook faster but are less healthy.
Precisely. And if you cut down the trees, the roots aren't there to hold the soil. The heavy rains come, they wash all the topsoil into the river. Now the river is polluted and full of silt, so your drinking water is dirty. and your farm has lost its most fertile soil, so your crops are poor, it's a cascade of failure.
So all connected.
It's a system, a biological system that was breaking down.
So in classic Maathai fashion, she proposes a solution that seems almost too simple. She says, let's plant trees. It started on World Environment Day, 1977. She led a procession to Kamakunji Park in Nairobi and planted 7 trees in honor of historical community leaders. Just 7 trees. That was the official birth of the Greenbelt movement.
But it wasn't just a symbolic gesture like, go plant a tree and feel good about it. She built a whole system. And this is the part I find absolutely brilliant. She turned it into an economic engine.
This is the key. This is the so what of the movement. It wasn't charity. She knew that if she just gave people trees, they might not care for them, they might not survive.
Right, there's no investment.
No investment. So she created an incentive. She encouraged the rural women to go into the nearby forests, find native seeds, and create nurseries in their own villages. Then, for every single seedling that survived and was successfully planted elsewhere, the women received a small stipend.
Oh, that's smart.
Just genius.
So now you're solving the firewood problem, you're fixing soil erosion, and you're putting money directly into the hands of rural women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that financial independence is revolutionary. Suddenly, these women didn't have to ask their husbands for money, for food or school fees or clothes. They were earning it themselves with their own hands. It completely shifted the power dynamic in the household. It gave them agency.
And it grew fast, I take it.
It exploded.
Mm-hmm.
By 1986, this wasn't just a Kenyan thing anymore. It was a Pan-African network. Representatives from 15 different African countries were coming to Kenya to learn her methods to combat desertification and rural hunger in their own nations.
It's a brilliant model of bottom-up development.
It really is. It proved that you didn't need massive World Bank loans or, foreign experts flying in to fix your country. You just needed the people and the seeds.
But as you can probably imagine, when you start empowering the poor and organizing rural communities, especially women,
Authoritarian governments get very, very nervous.
why is that? You'd think a government would be happy that someone is fixing the environment and helping the poor.
Because dictatorships rely on dependency. They rely on the people feeling helpless and looking to the big man, the president, to solve their problems. If the people suddenly realize they can solve their own problems, that they can organize, earn their own money, and literally change their own landscape, well, they might start asking what else they can change.
Like, say, the government.
Like the government. And that leads us directly into the darker side of this story, Section 3, the personal cost. Because while she's building this incredible movement, her personal life is it's falling apart. And the details here are, well, they're infuriating, honestly.
They are. It's a reminder that for women activists, the political is so often deeply, deeply personal. Her husband, Wangarĩ Maathai, who was a politician himself, he filed for divorce in 1977.
The exact same year she started the Greenbelt movement. That can't be a coincidence.
It seems unlikely. And his reasoning in court was shocking, even for the time. He claimed Wangari was too strong-minded for a woman.
Wait, what?
And that he was unable to control her.
Unable to control her. He actually said that in a court of law. It's in the court records. He was basically admitting that her independence, her success, her strength, that was the problem for him. He even went so far as to claim her behavior caused his high blood pressure.
Wow. Okay, so he's blaming his hypertension on her ambition. Doctor, my wife is winning too many awards. My blood pressure is spiking.
That's essentially the argument. And the tragedy is that the judge, who was a man, agreed with him. The court ruled in the husband's favor. It was this huge, humiliating public rebuke.
But she didn't take it quietly.
Not at all. In an interview with Viva magazine shortly after, she called the judge incompetent or corrupt. She basically said, if you agree with this man's reasoning, you don't understand justice.
I'm guessing the judge didn't appreciate that feedback.
He did not. She was charged with contempt of court and sentenced to 6 months in jail.
For an interview.
For an interview. She ended up serving 3 days before her lawyer managed to get her released, but the message was crystal clear. The system, the legal system, the social system was completely rigged against a woman like her.
And then there's the issue of the name. This is a small detail, but it says so much about her character. Her ex-husband demanded she drop his surname, Maathai.
Right. He wanted to strip her of that identity. But she had built her entire professional reputation as Mrs. Maathai. So she refused to go back to her maiden name. Instead, she found this brilliant loophole.
What'd she do?
She just added an extra A. So M-A-T-H-A-I became M-A-T-H-A-I.
Oh, that is such a power move.
Isn't it? It's brilliant branding. It was her way of saying, I'm keeping the identity I've built, but I am redefining it on my own terms. You don't own me. You don't even own my name.
But despite that defiance, she was struggling, right?
Financially.
Oh, massively. She lost her husband's income, and for a time she had to take a job with the UN in Zambia, which meant being away from her children just to survive financially.
So she's being attacked by the state. She's lost her marriage. She's separated from her kids. It was an incredibly difficult time. She was stripped of her status as a wife, fighting a government that viewed her as a nuisance at best. But this adversity just seemed to harden her resolve. It calcified her will. She wasn't just fighting for trees anymore. She was fighting for her right to exist in the public sphere.
She realized she couldn't separate the two.
Exactly. She realized that if she wanted to protect the environment, she had to confront the political system that was actively destroying it.
Which sets the stage for the biggest showdown yet. Section 4, the political battleground. We are fast-forwarding to 1989. The Green Belt movement is well established, but now the government decides to come for the public spaces themselves.
This is the famous story of the Uhuru Park skyscraper. The government, led by the dictator President Daniel Arap Moi, announced a plan to build a 60-story complex right in the middle of Uhuru Park.
For those who don't know, can you paint a picture of Uhuru Park?
It's the Central Park of Nairobi. It's the green lung of the city. It's where people go to pray, to hold political rallies, to eat lunch on a break, to just sit on the grass. In a crowded, bustling, often chaotic city, it's a sanctuary.
And the government wanted to put a 60-story skyscraper there.
Not just a skyscraper, a massive complex for the Kenya Times Media Trust, which was the ruling party's media group. It would have a trading center, galleries, offices, and this is the crucial part, a massive statue of President Moi himself.
Of course. There had to be a statue.
It was a vanity project of the highest order. It was about cementing his dominance, not just over the people, but over the physical landscape of the capital city.
So Maathai steps in. She doesn't have an army. She doesn't hold political office. She has, what, a typewriter?
She has a typewriter and an address book. She wrote letters to everyone, the president, the British High Commissioner, UNESCO, the foreign investors behind the project. She made this brilliant argument, saying that building in Uhuru Park was as sacrilegious as building in Hyde Park in London or Central Park in New York.
That's a smart way to frame it.
It was. She knew the Kenyan government wouldn't listen to her. But if she could make this an international issue, if she could shame them on the world stage, the investors might get spooked.
And the government's response was, well, it was not subtle. They didn't debate her on urban planning. They went straight for personal insults.
Oh, completely. They called her a crazy woman. The parliament, official sessions of the Kenyan parliament were spent attacking her character. They called the Green Belt movement bogus. And get this, a bunch of divorcees.
A bunch of divorcees? That specific insult feels so targeted.
It was absolutely meant to delegitimize them socially. In that conservative society, a divorced woman was seen as a failure, a rebel, someone outside the norm. Calling them a bunch of divorcees was a way of saying, these are broken women, don't listen to them.
And the president himself weighed in.
He did. President Moi gave a speech where he said that those opposing the project had insects in their heads. He then publicly told Wangarĩ Maathai to be a proper woman and be quiet.
Insects in their heads? The language is so vivid, so dismissive, but despite the insults, despite the fact that they actually broke ground and started construction, she won.
She won. The international bad press worked. The foreign investors got cold feet. They didn't want to be associated with destroying a public park and fighting this highly educated, incredibly articulate woman who was making headlines in London and New York. The funding dried up, and the project was canceled in 1990.
That victory must have felt incredible. She saved the park, but it also must have painted a giant target on her back.
A huge one. She had publicly humiliated a dictator. You just don't do that without consequences. And that moves us right into Section 5, blood and democracy. The 1990s in Kenya were extremely volatile. The fight for multi-party democracy was heating up, and Maathai was right on the front lines.
Let's talk about Freedom Corner. This happened in 1992.
So Maathai joins a hunger strike in Uhuru Park, the very same park she had just saved. But she wasn't just there for the trees this time. She was there with the mothers of political prisoners.
These were women whose sons had been detained by the state.
Yes, often without trial, for opposing the government. They were mostly elderly women, and they were simply demanding their son's release.
And the police didn't just let them sit there and protest peacefully.
No. The police moved in to forcibly remove them, and it turned violent. They used tear gas and batons on these elderly women. Wangarĩ Maathai was beaten so badly she was knocked unconscious and had to be hospitalized.
That's horrifying.
But then there is this famous, incredibly intense moment where some of the mothers, in a desperate act of traditional protest, stripped naked.
I want to unpack that because for a Western audience, that might just seem like a shock tactic. But in the Kenyan context, especially Kikuyu culture, it meant something very specific.
It meant everything. It's the ultimate curse. For a mother to strip naked before a man young enough to be her son is a way of saying, I gave you life, I nurtured you, and now you attack me, I shame you and your entire lineage. It's kind of moral, cultural nuclear option. And the reports say the young policemen, they were horrified. They turned away, they couldn't look.
It's this raw, visceral confrontation between the state's brute force and the moral authority of these women.
Exactly. And the horror didn't stop there. Later that same year, she found out her name was on a government assassination list.
A hit list.
A hit list. She had to barricade herself in her home. The police surrounded her house. They didn't knock. They used heavy cutters to slice through the security bars on her windows to arrest her. They charged her with treason and sedition.
This is what I mean about the Peace Prize being about more than just holding hands and singing songs. She was facing life in prison or death. How did she get out of that one?
International pressure again. By this point, she was known globally. Her work with the Greenbelt movement and the Uhuru Park protest had made her a kind of celebrity in environmental and human rights circles.
So people were watching.
People were watching. Senators in the U.S., like Al Gore and Edward Kennedy, they pressured the Kenyan government. They basically said, if you hurt her, there will be serious consequences for your foreign aid. And it worked. The charges were eventually dropped.
But the harassment continued. She accused the government of inciting ethnic violence to stay in power, and then the president turned around and accused her of inciting violence.
Yes, he claimed she was distributing leaflets to encourage attacks. She had to go into hiding again. And here's the twist that just blows my mind. Mikhail Gorbachev gets involved.
The former leader of the Soviet Union?
The very same. Gorbachev was the head of an organization called Green Cross International at the time. He invited Maathai to a conference in Tokyo. But Maathai couldn't go because she was in hiding and the government had blocked her from traveling. So Gorbachev personally pressured the Kenyan government to let her attend.
So you have the Cold War ending, and the former Soviet premier is calling Kenya about the tree lady. That is wild.
It proves that the whole world was watching. They saw that she wasn't just planting trees. She was planting the seeds of civil society. She was becoming a symbol of resistance that the Kenyan government simply couldn't crush without turning into a total pariah state.
Which brings us finally to the vindication, Section 6. The tide finally turns.
It took a decade of struggle, a lot of pain. She actually ran for president in 1997 and lost badly. She got very few votes because the opposition was fractured and tribal politics were still so strong. She tried to get into parliament and failed. But she kept going.
And then 2002 happened.
In 2002, everything changed. The opposition parties finally united under one banner, the National Rainbow Coalition. They swept to power in a landslide, ending the long, long rule of Kenyan and President Moi.
And Maathai runs for parliament again. How did she do this time?
She won her seat with 98% of the vote.
98%. That isn't an election, that's a coronation.
It is a complete and total mandate. The people of her district, T2, basically said, we are with you, we've been with you all along. She became the Assistant Minister for Environment. She was finally inside the government she had fought for so long. She wasn't throwing rocks at the building anymore. She had an office inside it.
And then just 2 years later, in 2004, the phone rings. It's the Nobel Committee in Oslo.
The first African woman, the first environmentalist. It was a shock to the world, but it also made perfect sense.
Let's pause on the significance of the first environmentalist part. Why did the Nobel Committee give a Peace Prize to a tree planter?
Because the committee was making a very specific and I think very forward-thinking point. They were saying that protecting the environment is a prerequisite for peace. If you destroy the ecosystem, you destroy the local economy. If the land turns to desert, people will fight over water. They'll fight over grazing land. They'll fight over firewood.
Resource scarcity leads to conflict.
Exactly. And Maathai had proven that connection with her life's work. She showed the world that when you heal the land, you empower the people, you heal the community, and you remove the drivers of conflict. Yeah. It's a holistic view of peace.
It's a powerful moment. But, in the spirit of a true deep dive, we also have to be honest about the complexities of her legacy. And Section 7 covers some of the controversy. Because people are complex, and even Nobel laureates can say things that made headlines for the wrong reasons.
Right, and it's important to talk about this. We have to address the AIDS controversy. In the early 2000s, a Kenyan newspaper, The Standard, reported that Maathai claimed that HIV was deliberately created by Western scientists to decimate the African population.
That is a very heavy accusation. Did she stand by that?
Well, it's complicated. When Time magazine asked her about it later, she seemed to walk it back. She issued a formal statement calling those kinds of views wicked and destructive. However, she did maintain a level of skepticism. She said she was sure the virus did not come from the monkeys and that people deserved the truth about its origins.
So she walked back the specific conspiracy theory, but kind of kept the general distrust.
Exactly. And we have to report that impartially. It reflects a deep distrust of Western science and pharmaceutical companies that exists in many post-colonial regions, often for very valid historical reasons. It doesn't negate her incredible environmental work, but it is part of her full story. It shows that even heroes can have blind spots or hold views that contradict established science in other areas.
On a much lighter note, in her later years, she also became a huge champion of a Japanese concept called motonai.
Yes, this is such a lovely part of her later years. After visiting Japan, she just fell in love with this word, motonai. It's one of those terms that doesn't translate perfectly into English.
What's the gist of it?
It roughly means a sense of regret concerning waste. It's about gratitude for resources,
Oh.
respecting them, and not wasting anything. It's the feeling you get when you see food being thrown away.
So it's kind of like waste not, want not, but with a more spiritual or emotional dimension to it.
Exactly. It acknowledges that objects and resources have a value that shouldn't just be discarded lightly. She started promoting this concept all across Africa. It fits so perfectly with her lifelong philosophy of reduce, reuse, recycle. She would even wear T-shirts with Motanai printed on them.
I love that. From the Kikuyu Highlands to the Nobel stage in Norway to promoting Japanese philosophy, she really was a global citizen.
She absolutely was. And sadly, she passed away in 2011 from ovarian cancer. But her legacy is physical. You can actually see it on the landscape.
Let's talk about that legacy in our outro. We're talking about the Wangarĩ Gardens in Washington, D.C., the Wangarĩ Maathai Institute for Peace and Environmental Studies in Nairobi. There's even a major road in Nairobi, Forest Road, that was renamed Wangarĩ Maathai Road.
Which is just the most beautiful poetic justice, considering she used to be blocked by police from entering parks in that same city. And at her alma mater, the University of Pittsburgh, they planted red maples in her honor.
Her memoir is titled Unbowed. And after going through this story, I think that is the perfect single word for her.
It is. She started by planting seeds in the dirt, just 7 trees in a park. And by the end, she had uprooted a dictatorship and fundamentally changed how the world understands peace. She proved, beyond any doubt, that the environment is political. You cannot separate the health of the land from the rights of the people living on it.
So here is the provocative thought we want to leave you with today. Maathai showed us that planting a tree can be a profound act of rebellion. In today's world, with all the challenges we face, climate change, massive inequality, digital surveillance, what is the modern equivalent? Where are the trees being planted today that are actually acts of rebellion?
That's the question, isn't it? What is that small, simple, constructive act that, if done by millions of people, changes the power structure? Is it growing your own food? Is it repairing your own electronics instead of buying new ones?
Is it building local face-to-face community networks in an age of digital isolation?
It could be any of those things. I think she showed us that the most powerful resistance doesn't always look like a protest march. Sometimes it looks like tending a garden.
Something to chew on. Maybe the revolution really does start in your own backyard. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the incredible life of Wangarĩ Maathai. We'll catch you on the next one.